Start now. Yeah, it says live. Yeah. Suresh, you're good to go.
Good afternoon. I warmly welcome all of you. I am Suresh Emmanuel, member of ISC Squared, Colombo Chapter, Chairman of Subcommittee, CISO Community Circle, and Initiation from ISC Squared, Colombo Chapter. Our objective is to provide a platform for all CISOs across all industry verticals to collaborate, share knowledge, and insights with peers. As our very first initiative, we are happy to have all of you to a joint panel discussion on strategies to combat emerging threats in 2023. It is indeed a timely discussed topic. Once a famous person said, time is what determines the security, but with enough time, nothing is unhackable. To set the outset, I would like to recognize our strategic partners, FITIS, SLASCOM, Computer Society of Sri Lanka, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Association of Professional Bankers, Women in Security Alliance Philippines, ISACA Sri Lanka Chapter, IEEE Young Professionals Sri Lanka for supporting this key initiative. It is my pleasure, and on behalf of IC Squared, Colombo Chapter Board, I warmly welcome the esteemed panelists. We'll start from the Anuprita, Daga, President and Chief Information Security Officer of Yes Bank, India. Migriño, Chairman, President, Women in Security Alliance, Philippines. Sunari Dandeniya, Chief Information Security Officer, Commercial Bank of Ceylon, PLC. Puneet Kukreja, Senior Partner, Head of Cyber Practice, EY, Ireland. Sunil Sharma, Director of Cyber Defense, Help AG, UAE. Last but not the least, our very versatile evergreen moderator, Rahul Neel, Vice President, Community Engagement and Editorial, Information Security Media Group, India. We are live on IC Squared Colombo Chapter YouTube channel and IC Squared Colombo Chapter LinkedIn page. The recording of the panel discussion will be on YouTube channel for later viewing as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post in the chat so that we will try to address our best during the panel discussions. Rahul, without further ado, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Suresh. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, according to the time zones of all the panelists and also all the listeners. Thank you very much for joining us here. It's a pleasure to moderate such a diverse panel, I must say. I mean, diversity is one of the hallmarks of this panel when I was discussing it with Sujit, and we ensured that we have the diversity in the panel. So thank you very much for that. I will quickly get started because we have very limited time, and we have quite an elaborate and illustrious panel. So each one of them will get appropriate time to talk to the peers, to put forth their opinions about a subject which is deeper than the ocean itself. When we talk to some folks in the military today, they very clearly mention it that besides covering the air, water, and surface, they are now compelled, or they are now very eager to cover the cyberspace, because that is where most of the wars are being fought. Cyber threats aren't anything new to the cybersecurity professionals. However, the intensity, the sophistication, the context, the methods are evolving almost overnight, very dramatically. And we have seen this in the past. I mean, we have seen this specifically in the past couple of years. There is literally mind-boggling data which comes out to us every day in form of either breaches or attacks, or identities compromised, or ransom being demanded, or nation states taking the critical infrastructure to ransom and so on. We also hear how the sophisticated technologies that are originally innovated for a better use by the practitioners or by the general public have been nefariously used by the cyber criminals to weaponize their attacks and cripple the information networks. There is a lot to cover, and certainly this topic is important because we are just leaving 2022 behind, getting into year 2023, and it is important for us, therefore, to know from certain professionals, certain CISOs, and information security practitioners as to what they perceive the threat would be going into the new year. I mean, threats won't change, as I said in the beginning. However, let's take their perspective. Before I begin, before I reach out to each one of the panelists, I would urge the panelists to be very prudent of time, because we have very limited time. And as I said, the panel is big, and we'll also have to build interactivity and take questions from all the delegates who are joining us from different parts of the world. So to begin with, I would invite each of the panelists to give their perspective in not more than 120 seconds, which is 2 minutes, on this topic. The key 2-3 threats that need immediate attention of the CISOs or cybersecurity professionals in the year 2023. Be very specific. You can talk about unique threats to your industry, your geography, and then I will go into specifics. So starting with you, Anuprita, please go on.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm sure, and good morning to everyone wherever there is a morning. Rahul, I mean, this is a very difficult question to ask because threat landscape is changing. But coming back to payment industry, and last 2 years, we have seen that, because of pandemic, everything is moving digital, and all payments are also moving digital. And if you see last 2 years, there are too many phishing attacks which are happening, and customer awareness, however efforts what you put it, those efforts are always going to be not sufficient. So these phishing attacks are increasing, and the view of a regulator is not to leave it to customers saying that I have. This is not my mistake. It is a customer's mistake, and I will not pay for it. So there is a lot of shift going from the technology to security control, real-time fraud risk monitoring, and now customer base, and where regulated entities are supposed to take it up. And what are the controls? What you do it? I think that is one of the area which has started evolution right now, but I think there's a long way to go. Second thing is that in pandemic, because of expansion and the lack of semiconductor devices and all, so having asset availability, whether servers or laptops, is becoming difficult, and that is where a lot of adoption has started on the cloud. Although in banking, the percentage of cloud adoption is less relatively, but still that is another thing which is going on. And if you see last maybe 60 days, I think there are too many ransomware attacks which are happening. And again, this is not focusing. So whether those are state-sponsored attacks, or whether this is vulnerability exploitation, zero-day log4, we have seen there are a lot of supply chain attacks. What we are seeing is that you attack the partner and then through attack, because the regulated entity has implemented a lot of preventive security controls, but now those preventive security controls is not very easier to block it. And let's find out what is the soft corner, and supply chain is where you get relatively the better probability what you have it. And through supply chain, you try to get it. I'm not talking about SolarWinds, because I can't say that, all security products or all big products will not have a technology related or security related process and controls. But besides that, they're trying to, go through that. At the same time, there are a lot of vendor process outsourcing, because if you have to expand the business, customer base acquisition or servicing, then you have to outsource, and that is where you may try to exploit the partner, and through partner you try to enter into the system. So these are 3-4 different things, and although there are too many other attack, the trending is also happening, but from finance perspective, I think these are the 4 things what I think that is the major focus what we should be having it.
No, excellent. I think we got a perspective up front from a payments and a finance industry point of view. And one of the most sought after industries when it comes to hunting by the threat actors, because that's where the money is. And that's where they try to find out more vulnerabilities. As you rightly said, that being regulated is a blessing in this case, because most of the security controls that industries otherwise won't have are applied here. But they still try to find out softer corners, attacks through supply chains, or cloud misconfigurations, and so on. So great start, Anuprita. Thank you so much. I will now move on to Mel. Mel, if you can unmute yourself and initial remarks.
Okay, so actually, thank you for the question, Rahul. And hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, actually, good evening. Actually, from my perspective, I would like to actually tackle primarily 2 immediate concerns. Well, the first one being on the cybersecurity skills shortage, because cybersecurity skills are really high in demand these days. So we need to encourage people from the different segments of the society, different backgrounds, to actually explore cybersecurity. Because for us to really win actually this battle on cybersecurity talent, is we need to be committed not only just in hiring cybersecurity resources, but as well as in terms of capability building, retaining the resources, and eventually investing on talent. So case in point, in our country, in the Philippines, the average time to actually onboard a cybersecurity resource is actually 6 months. Assuming that you would be able to actually get a good skills mapping, but then again, the assimilation in terms of the culture and adoption to specific organization processes is still a different ball game. And we have seen also experienced professionals who assume the CISO role. But of course, CISO role is something that is actually a senior role, right, within the organization, and practically an executive role. But we have seen also like accidental CISOs, right, assuming the role, who may have been lacking on certain segments or certain pillars within the cybersecurity discipline per se. So hence, we've seen certain challenges in terms of really crafting and realizing different cybersecurity challenges. Then I think the next one I would like to focus on IoT vulnerabilities. So I think this one somehow expanded to the enterprise of things. So there was this survey that says that 61% of the companies were using IoT, and this percentage only continues to actually increase. So with the expansion of the Internet of Things, right, the IT and OT convergence, hence your security risk also grow. Why? Practically because your attack surface also expands, right? Of course, this is with the blend of the advent of the 5G network. But if we look at the IoT vendors per se, right, and of course, many products have been out there in the market consisting your IoT mesh, who practically products are not really secured. Why? Because we've seen products that that are not properly patched, right? There is no sufficient support, cybersecurity support or security support after go live of these different products. Even so, in the RFP process, we have seen that there's actually very lean definition of cybersecurity requirements, and by resetting IoT security defaults on certain devices. So this needs to really be in conformance with the acceptable cybersecurity standards. So I think, Rahul, in my case, those are, just a few, cybersecurity threats that security leaders should look into for next year.
Oh, brilliant. Glad that you called out skills gap as a threat, because, that perhaps is the mother of all, reasons why the industry is playing a catch-up game with the threat actors. And with every passing month, quarter, half year, or a year, I think this gap is widening. And I'm really astonished to know, or the figures in other parts of the world might not be extremely different when you told that it takes 6 months to onboard a cybersecurity professional, and also touched upon the accidental CISO part. Very, very important point. And the second point, again, we are living in an age where everything is getting either connected or smart. So you talk from the connected factory to connected homes to connected cars to connected retail, logistics, connected healthcare. And that is where the vastness of IoT is being perceived, is being literally seen, literally visible. Going forward, this whole convergence of IT and OT is, on one side, is going to give industry the required push to become more sophisticated, more responsive. But on the other side, it certainly is widening the threat surface and is being exploited very, very badly, especially in the absence of standards and standardized products. Thank you very much, Mel. I move on to Sunil.
Thanks, Rahul, for the question, and hello to everyone. So Rahul, couple of things I think the security professionals need to look at. There are two types of threats, as we know, right? External and internal. So we always, most of the time, focus on external threats like, attackers, cyber criminals. But there is also an internal insider threat as well, which should be also looked into. Because given the changes happening in the environment and economical situations and stuff like that, as we probably are getting into a session, there will be financial challenges for people. So the insider threat becomes more active in that case. The organization should pay equal attention to insider threat, monitoring what the users are doing in the environment, whether their activities are normal or not. It's very, very important. From the external threat perspective, there is a shift, in last, I would say, 12 to 15 months. Ransomware is a big talking point for everybody, but ransomware has changed in last, 12 to 15 or 16 months. So before the ransomware, I used to call it click and get encrypted ransomware, right? So where you get something in your email, you click on it, it spreads in the network and start encrypting other stuff. Ransomware is not that anymore. So it's a mix of advanced persistent threat, or I would say advanced attackers. So what attackers are doing nowadays, and they first attack an organization, they stay in the organization, do profiling, steal the important data, whether it's your IP or it's user data or any confidential information. They steal that. They stay in the environment anywhere between 2 months to 6 months before they actually start encrypting. Right. Yeah. So this is like it's a new shift change in ransomware specifically. It's not just click and get encrypted ransomware anymore, and also which leads to what I call triple extortion. So the ransomware attacks are now, first they will encrypt something which is important to the organization, and then they will ask for money to do decryption. And most of the companies, they don't pay ransom just because something is encrypted, because we have good controls in place. And the second thing, second extortion they will do is, okay, they will say, okay, you're not going to pay this way, so I have your data. If you don't give me money, I will release the data in public. Yeah, and also companies are handling that as well. I would not say all the companies, but most of the companies are handling that situation well as well. And the third extortion is, as the attackers, they have access in the environment. They are actually selling this access to nation state organization. Let's say, for example, I'm based in UAE. if a ransomware attacker attack a government organization, they know that there are countries like Iran who will pay them a good amount of money to give access to a particular organization. So three things which I would say it's important for organization to look for is, one is phishing email. Anuprita mentioned about that. Almost 85% of the attack today also happens through phishing. So look after for the phishing, have good controls around that. That's one threat which should be taken very, very seriously. Yeah. The second one is around exploitable vulnerabilities or configuration issues. So that's second thing which organization should pay a lot of attention. And also, as we know, most of the vulnerabilities now come as 0-day. So I will also say that having a 0-day control, like when the patch is not available, how you're going to secure yourself for next 3 weeks, how you will reduce the risk for your organization, right? And the third is the user awareness, because the third point, which as one of the practice which I lead for Help AG, is the forensic and response. We see that valid accounts are mostly the third biggest reason for initial access into the environment, whether it is through phishing emails or people are using same username password in Facebook or LinkedIn and stuff like that. So these are the 3 points I would say that organization should pay attention in 2023 to be secure.
Excellent. Another fresh perspective came from you, Sunil, when you spoke about the insider threats. It continues to, create issues for the cybersecurity departments. It could be for any reason. I mean, it could be a distress, it could be a vengeance, it could be malicious intent. But insider threats are something which are not going away anywhere. Until you are dealing with humans, because that's where the behavioral and emotional issues trickle in. Also about how sophisticated single, double, triple extortions are happening in cases of ransomware. We are all aware of it. And so much so that the bad actors have also started capturing the backup data. That's even worse. That they first get hold of your backup data and then attack the production data, and you are then completely crippled. Great perspective. I now move on to Sunari. Sunari, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello, Rahul. Thank you very much for your question, and good day to all our panelists and the listeners. So in terms of the key to 3 threats that needs attention of the CISOs in the coming year, I think I could not agree more with Anuprita and Sunil, because I think all predictions indicate that ransomware and phishing are here to stay, and that there's no doubt that these 2 threats are going to keep the CISOs up in the night in the coming year as well. Other than that, I also agree with Anuprita on that organizations should be on high alert with regards to supply chain attacks, because I also believe that we should expect to see the supply chain increasingly leveraged by cyber criminals in the coming years as well, not just for financial gain, but also it could be politically motivated, specifically within critical national infrastructure sectors such as finance, energy, healthcare, and so on. These could be more attractive targets to cyber criminals. And also, I think the pandemic in the last 2 years, as Anuprita touched upon, has shown us that the most fragile part of the global economy is the interconnectedness. So by targeting companies that play critical roles in the activities of other businesses, for example, the raw material suppliers, like we saw that there was a shortage of computer chips. So by targeting firms on which others are dependent on, cyber criminals have the ability to grind the entire supply chain to halt. And another point of supply chain is what we call the software supply chain. So 2 years on to the SolarWinds attack, we do not see any signs of attacks on software supply chain abating. So I think attacks on particularly open source And commercial software will continue in 2023. And vulnerabilities on open source software is something that the cyber criminals will target on to bring down the supply chain. And I think before closing, one more comment on, I think another aspect on the supply chain is that now attackers are taking advantage of access granted to third-party providers like the cloud service providers as a backdoor to the company's most sensitive core system. So I think supply chain is going to keep, attacks are going to keep the CISOs very worried in the coming year. Thank you.
A great point again, Sunari. Another fresh perspective came in, and let me tell you that about a month ago, when I was speaking to a very high-profile CIO who's manning the IT systems of the U.S. Army, this point came in. How are they safeguarding the software supply chain, especially when most organizations are very eager and keen to use open source. The answer there was that while there is no, one silver bullet to cap that area or to contain that. However, it is important that the bill of materials is checked thoroughly, and awareness and vigilance should be on top of the mind when you are doing it. Also, strategies like shift left are pressed in to ensure that there is minimum space left for anyone to enter in. So great perspective, Sunari. Thank you. Last but not the least, I turn on to Puneet. Puneet comes from a consulting background. He has the understanding of all sectors and various perspectives. Over to you, Puneet.
Thanks, Rahul, and it was brilliant listening to everyone. The challenge going last is that what else are you going to say when everyone on the panel is so credentialized? But hey, you know what? Out of my list, I have crossed a few things which were said, so I'm not going to repeat those. I'll probably start off by saying that there are 4 or 5 things in addition to what has already been said. Right? We've talked about SBOM. We've talked about the lack of skill set in cyber. We've also talked about the response time. Sunil covered off insider threat. So from my view, if we build on to all of those, and if we walk away with our top 10 today, right, Rahul? So hopefully you'll have a nice list of the top 10. I'll add 5 to it. In my mind, given this speed of change that is happening, and given that we've just had COVID, and we are literally coming out of it. I wouldn't say we are out of it. The challenge is still there. I think the biggest, one of the top 5 for me is erosion of organizational boundaries. The biggest challenge for CISOs is how do they now manage the erosion of organizational boundary? Because now it's not about data in your data center. It's not about data in your applications. It's not about data in the cloud. It's about data at home. So how would you look at, from an organizational perspective, both technology, process, HR, policies about data at home? So I think that's, for me, that's number 1. And following on from that, if data at home is your biggest challenge, then do you have an understanding of your organizational landscape with a data-centric lens? We've talked about third parties, we've talked about elevated access, we've talked about regulation. Anuprita talked about why and how regulation is brilliant, and the organizations that actually have the means available to them, they can shut the boundaries down. But then do we understand the life cycle of our data? Because inside the thread that Sunil talked about is about accessing data. So how does somebody with a red profile is now accessing the blue profile, and how would we then monitor it? Right. So if you then move on from data at home to understanding your landscape with a data-centric lens, for me, where it then goes in is the weaponization of bots. So we have RPA, we all talk about it. We all talk about how how RPA is going to help us reduce time and effort. But if we then inverse it, well, how are we going to respond if, when, and even now these bots are weaponized? And how would we then respond with the speed at which they will attack our environment? If you then add that on, or if there is a reference to the Mirai attack that happened on our OT environment, what does that convergence of IT and OT look like? Because OT security is somewhere where if a bot is weaponized, with the speed of change and the spread that it will, and the speed of spread that it will undertake, do we have incident response mechanisms in place? Do we have monitoring in place? Because I know Mel talked about it takes 6 months to onboard cyber skills, but once you're running a digital transformation, do you have enough skills which are convergent skills or adjacent skills in cloud and cyber? Because when they look to attack the advanced and the expanded ecosystem, it's not one of those, it's all of those. And the last thing for me will be that once you've understood all of that, the biggest challenge will be, in my mind, and by far which sits on top of everything, is brand perception and trust. So once you've undergone a cyber event, I'll call it an event, how would you ensure that your brand's perception of trust is managed and maintained? Managed during the incident with the kind of signals you put out, and then following the incident, the kind of updates that you do that ensure that yes, it will happen. It's a fact of life. It's like driving a car on the road. You take out insurance. Cars are in accidents, but the brand of the reputed car makers is not damaged. So how do we bring that organic mentality into our response plans, into the way CISOs plan for next? So Rahul, conscious of time, those are my top 5 as what we need to look at.
No, I knew that, since you were last, I knew you will come with a very, very fresh perspective. And being a consultant, it is imperative that you did, job well done. And I would concur with your thought about weaponization of bots. I mean, if we take any incredible floating data about the Twitter's bot army, give or take between 10 to 15% of the accounts are bots, and kind of weaponization that is happening there, we all see. Everyone sitting in this panel would agree that the DDoS attacks have evolved over time. And again, the weaponization of IoT devices into attacking DDoS botnets is simply the latest trend, the current thing from which to create an army of bots. So excellent perspective. And I would also sum it up by agreeing with you that one thing that gets completely tarnished is the brand and the trust in the brand, and it is very, very difficult, I would say impossible, to build it once again if your credentials are compromised or if your brand is tarnished due to any of these reasons. And therefore, last point from my side, it is very important to use cybersecurity as a tool for competitive advantage rather than thinking it as a cost center. So great, we have done justice with our initial round. I would, in a copybook style, I would again go back to Anuprita and ask her about.
So Rahul, before you start the second round, one thing I just thought of, while I heard everybody, I was overwhelmed with the kind of responsibility every CISO is carrying. And I think this is one more risk that, burnout of a CISO. Because, whatever you do it every time, and I'm sure when we finish 23, Rahul is again going to come out with one more podcast. What about 24? Right? So I think that this is also one of the factors what we really need to think about it. I mean, not on a actual problem perspective. I'm just saying that, whatever you do it, and every industry has its own nuances. Every geography has its own nuances, and whatever you do it is not sufficient. And I always get to see from somebody from internally, yeah, I mean, there are so many risks. You should have sleepless nights. I said, like, every moment we hear and we read the incident, we think about, oh, what's happening in my backyard. Right. So I think this is one more thing I think we should start talking about it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, not very long ago, I was reminded, I mean, it's a little dated information to share with all the esteemed delegates here, but it is reminded how the US Securities and Exchange Commission is now bringing accountability, spreading the accountability across the top management, including the board of directors, that cybersecurity is not the responsibility of a CISO's organization only. And therefore, the board of directors are going to be equally accountable. And therefore, they have to come up to the occasion to share that responsibility and know the organizational risks. And therefore, that perhaps might save the CISO from a burnout, because right now CISO is the one which is under the hammer always, for right from a small vulnerability to a large attack that is being carried out on organizations. So to continue with you, great point, Anuprita, that you made in the last. So continuing with you, how do you see the attack surface from outside in and inside out, given the current geopolitical scenario, the growing net of regulatory and compliances that are being enforced? How do you see a CISO creating a robust cyber resilience, going forward?
So I think, having said whatever the comment, what I was talking about it, I think at least from the financial industry, and when I interact with multiple CISOs from financial industry, there is a buy-in from the board, there is a buy-in from the management, there is quite a bit push from the regulator perspective. And one of the experience what I saw, and I personally had to go through it, when a board member has also been
I think yeah.
Carry
on, you were not heard for a while, but carry on. Now you are
okay. So I was just thinking, I was just saying that, the kind of awareness has happened, and when there was geopolitical unrest which was happening, and there was a pull from the board members saying that, oh, okay, this is happening, and what is our preparedness from cybersecurity perspective? And I think that is where I feel like, okay, there is quite a good presence established at a different level. Regulator had come out with that, but what I'm seeing is that one is preparedness is going to be continuous, right? Again, what we need to see that we need to go from outside in, right? Because outside, and as everybody was talking about, the perception, the reputation, the credibility, and resiliency. So from resiliency perspective, I think this is where, we need to have all playbooks and drives and simulation and all of the things, so that people are aware that if I meet with an accident, and which is cybersecurity incident, okay, how do I go and resolve and respond to it? I think that goes by a book, and which most of the people are, maybe from financial industry, are prepared for that. But what we need to do is that from resiliency perspective is that, is it that only responding to that make a sense? And as we were talking about supply chain, time to detection is very, very important. And here, time to detection, what we are talking about is that what the outside world is looking at me in the sense at the organization, what are the vulnerabilities, what people are seeing it from outside, that is what we need to take this on a priority. That is point number one. Point number two is that when we are outsourcing to so many partners, so it's a partner ecosystem, right? Whether it is cloud, or whether it is business outsourcing, or whether it is technology outsourcing, whatever we do it, we can't work everything in-house. So we have to have a whole ecosystem which we need to build. And even within the ecosystem, if there is any threat or any vulnerability, obviously it is going to back me when my data is being shared. So I mean, is my responsibility to just see that, what is my external exposure? And that is how I prioritize it. We also need to see about the whole ecosystem. So what is the partner exposure? Because we have API connected world, cloud adopted world, business process outsourcing world. So our whole ecosystem has become an ocean now. I also need to see what is my surrounding, what is the vulnerability, and whether that impacts me. Even that also we need to look at it. The major change again in last 1 year, 1.5 years, what I'm seeing is that there is quite a good kind of collaboration between the government, the government, the regulator, and the companies which have started, and that is giving us a very good, when the whole industry is coming together and trying to address that problem as the institutional problem or as the systematic problem, it helps us to take the lesson from somebody else and also try and implement and start monitoring perspective. That is what we do, right? And also, as we say, time to detection, do we think about cybersecurity is only as a technology risk? No, it is not only technology risk. We also need to think about is that when the transaction is happening, how well we have a real-time transaction monitoring, because that is also a business level, time to detect. And do we really communicate to the customer that, something unusual behavior, what we are seeing in your account, is it what you have, or do we need to block all those traffic? So I think at every level, like at internal, our own company level, at the partner level, and even at the customer level, this whole ecosystem, which we really need to build it and have all these controls and monitoring. Control can't be preventive nowadays because we are in a digital world. I mean, again, we have just recently India come with digital currency. So we can't have prevent and reduce the threat landscape. But we have to see how do we early detect it and how do we really alert a person, whether technology or people or process or customer, and how do we take immediate calls, collaborate with other regulated entities and try and block those fraudulent transactions, track or block those fraudulent accounts, so that, our overall, the country level or the global white hat versus black hat, how do we reduce the loss with multiple controls? That is what we need to think about it.
Oh, great. I see the CISO talking her heart out, and I'm sure it's easy to articulate. It's very complex to execute. I understand that. To your point of, detection, thankfully, due to the intuitive technologies that are prevailing today, the time taken to discover a cybersecurity breach has drastically reduced. Earlier, it used to be to the extent of 280, 270 days, almost a year, which is now reported as 197 days or 190 days before, the time taken to discover a breach, and almost up to 70 days to contain it. So therefore, it is important for organizations to put absolutely agile controls to detect, prevent, and restore, recover. Again, another point that you made is the bonhomie, the sharing of information between various agencies, whether they are regulators, policymakers, or business owners, is absolutely critical. And therefore, each stakeholder has to play their role very astutely. Thank you very much, Anuprita. Going back to you, Mel, I will continue with the topic that you spoke about, the threats which emanate from the IoT environment. The data is today living on the edge of network, and IoT is where the edge is, and therefore it is growing. The growing usage of IoT and sensors is something that is going to create more problems for the CISOs and cybersecurity professionals. Where do you see the major pitfalls in the current security techniques?
Yeah, okay. So I think Rahul, let me just quickly step back, right? So when we say edge device, so that would actually pertain to where the data is collected and processed. So these edge devices are actually part and parcel of your whole IoT ecosystem. So when the object has enough storage and enough actually computing power to make low latency decision. So within the context of the smart infrastructure, so majority of the components within the mesh, right, within your mesh network are actually IoT that practically connects millions of devices and processes, could be confidential or even personal data, and delivers this information to your end users, right? So then when you talk about securing the data at the edge, or your edge security, is practically a method of protecting data that sits on the edge of your corporate network. So this would mean that it could be either stored or could be either transported through devices that sit outside your data centers. No, so what is needed is actually a solution that combines web filtering. You also need to look at the traffic, so you need to have something sort of like an intrusion detection. You need to secure the endpoint, and you also need to actually protect the data on the fringe as well as the data on your network. But I think aside from that, you need to make sure that you have visibility and control. You need to secure all of your entry points. You need to secure your data storage as well as those actually at the transport layer. You need to manage your attack surface. So you need to do your attack management surface exercise. And of course, having said all of this, you need to supplement this with your cyber threat intelligence. So the cyber threat intelligence should no longer be supporting within the bounds of your cyber defense operations or within your SOC. It should actually go beyond that and eventually trying to complement it with the enterprise risk management, like the likes of fraud, right? So having said that, when we talk about pitfalls or let's say challenges, so support that can emanate from a typical IT and OT transformation. So I think one would be the lack of unified mindset of leaders to actually champion DX. So most of the time, cybersecurity is actually included as part of the technology. So it's practically OT and technology. So that's just it, right? But the DX journey, more so within the critical infrastructure, cybersecurity should be at the middle of should be at the middle of your IT as well as your OT. And then the next one, I think, is the lack of harmonizing capabilities. So you can imagine, of course, OT, right? The OT experts, they have a different mindset. They know different processes and protocols. Then and then there goes your cybersecurity, there goes your IT guys, right? Specifically those that are actually doing data science, right? Because you wanted to actually make the most out of your data within operational technology, which is part and parcel of your whole DX. But then again, if there is no knowledge exchange that's actually happening, that will bring forth appreciation and eventually education between these three parties. Hence, it's not going to take off. And then I think the last one would be around visibility and control, which are only implemented at the end of your DX journey. Or if you look at it like, your infrastructure lifecycle or development lifecycle. Hence, cybersecurity, right, as well as the two factors that I've mentioned earlier should be included as early as the conceptualization phase. So cybersec should be viewed as an enabler in the organization. It's very easier said than done. But cybersecurity, like what you've mentioned, I would also want to echo on that. Regardless of which industry you are in, if you're undergoing the DX or any typical system change, it has to be an adoption of security by design as well as the shift left. So meaning once the business and technology guys would start brainstorming, there has to be an equivalent effort and representation coming from the technology risk perspective. Thank you.
Great thoughts. Every time I'm asking questions to my panelists, I'm discovering something really fantastic. 2-3 points that I would like to highlight from what Mel just said, and it is ironically, this is truth, that there are different mindsets when it comes to the OT environment, to the IT environment, and in the middle of that, you find cybersecurity being kind of sandwiched. While talking to practitioners, I am now given to understand that where cybersecurity should reside is in the DevOps environment and not in the cybersecurity organizations. And that's a very welcome thought that I would like to second whosoever says that, because that is the real shift left. That is the real secure by design, the following of real secure by design principles. So thank you very much, Mel, again, for your inputs. I now move again to Sunil. Sunil, you have been a security practitioner for a fairly long time, managing SOC operations, digital forensics, to incident response, and helping your customers with a resilient cybersecurity posture. Now, besides the cyber hygiene, which are some of the areas that you would prescribe or that you would propose for the CISOs to be very, very watchful of in the coming years?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. So Rahul, one of the things, as I'm leading SOCs for some long time, one of the things which Anuprita talk about detection, and we should be responding fast. One of the biggest challenge, I'm sure all the CISOs and their SOC fields and the pain I would say they have is alert fatigue. So when we are doing the collection of all sort of logs, and then those logs come into your centralized monitoring solution, what you will notice is that between 80 to 90% of them are false positives, right? So now we have a human who is monitoring those logs, right? As a human, if you are looking at something which you think is false positive 90% of the time, there is a very good chance that you will probably miss a true positive in that flood of the false positive. Yeah. Right? So this is one of the biggest challenge when you're monitoring any environment. And one of the challenge which I have noticed across many years of doing this is that people usually collect a lot of data, right? And then they don't realize that most of the data actually doesn't even contribute to the alerts which they are monitoring. So they collect a lot, and they don't understand what is actually the most important stuff to collect and what should be monitored. So what I talk to my customers is, see, if you have a centralized monitoring system as a security solution like a SIEM or something like that, that should be used for monitoring cyber threats, because that's what they should do, not as an operational tool where you pump all the data, right? So if you see from attack perspective, right, it happens, any attack, you can pick any attack. It will involve either a device, whether it's a laptop or IoT device, any sort of a device, or it will actually have a user. So any attack will have both of them. Either it will be a user or it will be a machine. So what I talk to my customers is how they can minimize the collection and maximize the visibility, right? And how do they use other factors, right, to basically enhance their detection and response capabilities, right? So I talk about visibility and capability. So visibility, for example, the customers needs to look at endpoint visibility. So there are nowadays tools like EDR, endpoint detection response tool, which gives you excellent visibility into that. Then you can also look into some network analysis tools, which gives you good visibility into your network, because endpoint detection response tool, for example, are agent based. So if you have IoT devices or any network devices, you'll not be able to monitor them. So you need to have visibility on network side. And the third is user behavior analytics, right? As I said, most of the attacks will involve a user. So if you can analyze a behavior of a user, like what, for example, Sunil does when he comes 9 o'clock and he works till 6 o'clock in a usual day, and what is unusual. So just collecting these three set of log sources, I would say, instead of collecting all the myriad of logs in your ecosystem, and then topping up that with what I call operationalized threat intelligence. So most of the companies, they do threat intelligence, but what they use is what we call IOCs, indicator of compromise. So it's IP domain, bad IP, bad domain. Okay, let's go and block them. So there's another item in threat intelligence is called indicator of attack, or TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. So what I always like, what we do is when we look at TTPs, we'll try to create detection rules based on TTPs, not only based on IOCs. So then you can provide a better visibility into the environment, right? And then having something like automated response, and again, Anuprita talked about response is important. But if you see typically, if I want to block a IP on firewall, it's not with the IT security team. It will be probably with the network team. And if you send them a request at Friday 1 a.m., the possibility is that IP will be blocked on Monday morning, right? Yeah. So if you can provide that response capability to your security team, so that they can block those things and respond to them immediately instead of waiting for other teams to do that. So basically a combination of network visibility, endpoint visibility, user visibility, top up that with the good intelligence, operationalized intelligence, and have a response capability. And one more angle I want to add, Rahul, I actually have developed what I call threat detection and response stack. If you go to my LinkedIn page, I have put a paper on there. So what are the components which can provide minimum collection and maximum detection? And I have proven this against many APTs. Like I did a presentation recently in US where I actually practically showed them that for CISA top vulnerabilities, it was actually covering around 95% of the attack surface. And another one last thought I will also want to share with CISOs is you don't have to detect everything, right? So if you look at the cyber threats, right, I follow MITRE ATT&CK framework. So it's around 13, 14 tactics, around 200 plus techniques, right, from left to right. So the attacker, if you detect anywhere between from first to the last, just second last, technique, you will still be able to handle that situation, right? So the only issue will be more the right the attacker goes in the attack chain, your response will be expensive, your cleanup will be more expensive because you have to clean more stuff. But it doesn't mean that the attacker will be able to successful in what they are trying to do, whether it's exploitation or encryption. So don't try to detect everything. Try to detect, like for example, in the MITRE ATT&CK, just make sure that you have visibility of all the tactics, and have more tactics in the left as possible, because that will reduce you the pain of response and cleanup and those things later on. So these are some of the thoughts I would share with CISOs to look in when it's come to monitoring and response and detection. And one more thing I would say, Anuprita was talking about prevention. My thought on prevention, we invested too much in prevention. But keep in mind, if you get attacked by ransomware or APT or anything, your prevention controls have failed 100%. That's for sure. Otherwise, nobody will be able to get into your environment. So paying more attention to detection and response, as Puneet also mentioned, to manage your brand perception in the market, your response needs to be very well crafted and practiced as well, as Anuprita also mentioned. So these are the thoughts I would lead that point on.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. I think it was a mini playbook that you just read out for the benefit of the attendees here, and I would certainly echo on a few things, like you have to minimize the sources from where you are collecting the logs, maximize your visibility, in the areas like endpoint, network, do a thorough network analysis. There are tools available for endpoints. You can go, it has traveled from MDR to EDR to XDR now, and to I don't know what DR will it evolve into in the future. Important is to look at automating the response, because it is humanly impossible to sift through so many logs, find out the false positives, separate them, and then focus on the real ones. So great. Moving on to Sunari.
Rahul, sorry, just one more thought just came to my mind. Is the reason why I advocate collecting less, because then you also have to create less detection rules, less pain, less false positives. So just want to give that message out as well. Thank you.
No, great indeed. Thank you so much. So Sunari, moving on to you. You are perhaps one of the rare, I would, if I can say so, the only woman CISO in the local banking sector in Sri Lanka. Correct me if I went wrong there. Given the threat landscape and the growing attacks on the financial sector companies, what's your assessment of the regulatory roadmap for creating better resilience? Also, given that industry has a great shortage of skills and has got gender imbalance, what steps can be taken to rectify those anomalies?
Yes, Rahul. So unfortunately, what you mentioned about my position is correct, which is not the case, because we definitely need to bring in more female cybersecurity professionals. But starting off with your question about how the regulations are shaping up. So I think that for decades, organizations were pretty much being left to deal with cyber incidents on their own. However, like recent high-profile attacks, like for instance, the Colonial Pipe, which has had ripple effect across societies and like borders, have kind of helped the governments and the regulations having the feel to do something. And many are now considering laws and regulations. And as a result, a whole suite of new cybersecurity regulations and enforcements are offering around the world, which are not only related to cyber incident reporting, but also cyber resilience and also data protection and privacy. So globally, of course, there are many initiatives, like, for instance, the US passed cybersecurity legislation mid this year, and they also passed Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, which will require the critical infrastructure companies, like including the financial companies, to report cybersecurity incidents. Then I think just a few weeks ago, the EU Parliament passed new cybersecurity laws, which is tightening the cybersecurity obligations for essential sectors, including financial. Then I think India CERT has tightened the incident reporting requirements. Then down under, Australia is looking to bring amendments to privacy legislation. So across the world, there's more focus by the regulators. And along with these other governments and regulators, Sri Lanka too has joined these efforts in increasing oversight on cyber resilience. So earlier this year in March, Sri Lanka has introduced the Personal Data Protection Act. And for the banking and finance sector, which is, of course, the backbone of the economy, the regulator has introduced a very comprehensive technology risk management and a cyber resilience roadmap, focusing on various aspects of cyber resilience, like the risk assessments, the implementations, the third-party integrations, and so on. So I think the point is that companies can look at this in two ways. You can be overwhelmed by all of these regulatory requirements, and I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, definitely it's going to take a toll on the CISOs and the companies, but you can also look at it very positively and kind of make use of these regulations as an opportunity to either establish or fine-tune your cyber risk frameworks, and also improve your cyber incident management, the crisis management, and prepare for the increased regulatory requirements. Because I think we all know, we've all been saying that compliance doesn't necessarily mean security. So companies should look at it from a point of view of improving security. And I think the good point about these new regulations, as you mentioned, Rahul, is most of these now require the attention and the accountability of the board. So which is a good time for the CISOs to actually start articulating the requirement to the boards in a way that the boards would understand, talk about reputation, put it in the form of risk, resilience, and the reputation to the organization. So in a way, I think all these regulations are helping the CISOs and the cyber leaders in getting the much needed direction and the sponsorship from the top. And also, I think coming to the second part, one more thing, I think, and also it's time for companies can't really sit back till these rules and regulations get implemented. So I think companies need to start looking at the implications that these would have. So you can start looking at your policies and procedures. For example, some of these regulations have an impact on how you report on ransomware, on your cyber insurance, so on and so forth. And I think another important point is it is not something that people can just put on the CISO or the IT function. So companies need to realize that these have implications across the organization, and starting from the board level, you need to start analyzing the impact and start working towards this. And coming to the second part of your question on cyber skill shortage, I mean, as Mel said, I mean, ISC Squared recent study shows that there are 3.4 million seats vacant in the cybersecurity field, which is not going to get filled anytime soon. So I think if we are to secure the teams necessary to tackle information cybersecurity, we need to look at a creative approach. So non-traditional talent models need to be looked into. For example, companies can look at mid-career professionals who want to change to cybersecurity by upskilling or reskilling them. And we can tap into certain non-traditional talent sources, for example, veteran programs or experienced individuals coming out of the military. And you spoke about the skill gap. Of course, I think we need to really bring in, I mean, not just to bump the numbers to sort out the gender disparity, but obviously we need all the help we can get, whether it is male or female. So there are a lot of female security professionals out there that we can bring in. I think companies need to look at more flexible work schedules and implement mentoring programs in women in tech groups, as well as I think we need to start as early as from the time of the universities. Of course, then a few more other things that you can look at is like one good way we talk about to address the workforce shortage is to combine cognitive technologies like AI, ML. Of course, with a proper governance structure, these would help. And I think also companies can look at things like collaboration. For example, you can go for Sunil was talking about security operations. So you can go for sectoral security operations centers, perhaps. So this can help in curbing the skill shortage to a certain level. And of course, outsourcing is definitely going to be on the cards for CISOs, I think, to adapt to the internal capabilities.
Great. So I particularly liked your phrasing the term that the industry has to be creative in terms of finding alternative to the skills shortage. And the methods that you described, some of them are very, very practical. Some of them, I must admit that they are very futuristic, very disruptive and futuristic. For example, sectoral, models that you were talking about. That is where I anticipate that one has to have the evolution of thought process to start riding on that journey. On to your point of how regulations are creating better cyber resilience. Most certainly, at times they become very overwhelming because there are so many checks and balances that a security professional has to manage, and therefore it becomes more complex than complementing the current strategies. However, that's done for a cause, and the cause is safeguarding the data of either businesses or citizens. Great. So Puneet, your number comes after a long gap, I understand, and thank you for your patience. Really, thank you for your patience. But being on the consulting side, and in the European continent, where I would say, and seeing from a distance, that data privacy has been paramount, where the data regulators are most active and vigilant. How would you give your assessment of data privacy laws in different industries, and how does the adherence to those laws reduce the cyber and digital risk, and therefore increase the digital trust?
Rahul, thanks. I have a view on regulation, which is that sometimes it creates an adverse effect to the intent, because regulation often provides a false sense of security if we go into a checkbox style approach. GDPR, privacy, PCI DSS before that, the MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore guidelines, they've done a lot for the industry to raise the bar, but I think compliance, in my mind, does not equate security. Okay, and I'll let that one sink in for a minute, because we've had 27,001, which then became 27,002. Then we had NIST. We've got NIST 8053. There are over 1,000 controls. If you look at what Australia does, Australia for its government has the Information Security Manual. If you start to look at controls, and if you start to look at data, and if you start to look at privacy, yes, fines create a deterrent, but alignment and compliance to regulation or policy does not make your environment secure. Because if we look at, let's look at the NIST framework that is now coming out, which is all to do with securing critical infrastructure. It talks about the core aspects of cyber hygiene, which is, have you patched your system? How vulnerable your systems are? Have you secured your supply chain? Do you understand your third parties? And if you've done all of that, do you have an incident response methodology and model in place? So I think laws, regulations help move the dial, but I don't think compliance to laws and regulation creates a secure environment for you to operate in. Now, given you've talked about GDPR, data privacy in Europe, and given I think I'm well placed, given I spent 22 years in Asia Pac, I spent majority of my adult life in Australia, spent time in China, and now I'm here. I think I'm fairly well placed to say that the way Europe looks at security is in a very policy process heavy manner. The way the US looks at security is technology tools first, and the way Asia Pac is positioned, I would say, with that fine balance of we'll do policy where we need to, and then we will have that right amount of technology to support it, is where I think the future will actually come from.
Yeah.
Right, because the way Europe is actually structured, if you look at the European Union, you all have to be aligned. And what happens when you align is that you actually follow the lowest common denominator. Right, and ESA has been doing a lot of work in this space. There's a lot of good knowledge, good IP, and absolutely the data-centric lens has been put front and center. And I did talk about data-centric lens has been put front and center, but that also then lulls you into a false sense of security, because then you start to say that, well, I have all of these layers of security, right? And layered security in my mind, and then if we start to look at what 23-24 looks like, layered security, or the perception of layered security in my mind, will start to create a sense of complacency. So being aligned to GDPR, having PCI DSS reporting in place, perhaps gives you the opinion that I'm very secure, right? But it then starts to remove, or it does not go into the detail that looks at, okay, well, what does a zero trust model for me look like? What does mesh architecture and security look like? And I was reading the questions that we have in the chat. So I'll try and weave that one in, where they said, well, what's the opinion on connected security architecture? Well, there are a number of security architectures that exist. In my mind, mesh and zero trust are the most prevalent today. Right, and if you start to look at zero trust, it does bring in multiple elements of infrastructure, identity, data, cloud, compliance. It starts to provide that convergence across the board, right? And then if you look at GDPR, data security laws, how they start to look at it, they look at data across all of these. And then you then start to look at the required control sets that are needed, the technologies that you would need to implement, the incident response that you will need to have, they all start to converge and mesh. And I think a good example around the data security laws is what China has done with its China cybersecurity law, and the way they've brought around and matured it over the last 10 years, where they've taken the concept of data, but merged it in with the concept of important information. And they then simply say, then they've taken an internal view as to what's important for me as my country versus just having a compliance model for somebody to go and adopt a tick box approach. Right, Sunil, not the direct answer to Europe and GDPR, but I thought it was important because none of it exists in isolation, right? And if you then start to talk about zero trust, if you then look at endpoint security, network security, infrastructure security, identity, where does the SOC sit? And we have vendors selling SOC sort technology saying that's the next silver bullet, right? It's about that ecosystem that we operate in, and then understanding from a brand protection and trust perspective, what does layered security actually mean, and what part of it needs to be automated from an automated defense perspective as to what is a pure compliance checkbox, for example, consent, right? So it's then logging, tracking consent. How do you do that? That then starts to get into the architecture of how systems are developed. What would you do with cookies? Do you manage cookies within the browser? And if you're managing them within the browser, where would they save? Well, what does that then look like in browser security, which is not part of anything but just at the endpoint? So my view, to close off your question, is GDPR privacy, whilst very important, is just one of the 5 pillars that I would talk about when I talk the ecosystem of cyber.
No, great. I asked you a question. The question might have been very conservative and sort of naive, but thanks that you opened up beyond the scope of the question, frankly, Puneet, because now we have a fair idea of how various continents are looking at the holistic cybersecurity, and which is perhaps the best approach, if not the best, but the better approach to follow. And as you rightly said, or as you said, with a great deal of conviction, that compliance does not equate strong cybersecurity posture, and therefore there is a need to look at some of the current approaches. One of which is, of course, the mesh approach and the zero trust approach, where you cover everything, including the infrastructure, the identity, the data, the cloud, all the other, the whole 9 yards of cybersecurity. Okay, so now, Sujit went hiding somewhere. I don't know where he vanished, but since he's on the screen with me, I would like to make use of opportunity, because he's one of the well-traveled, well-read practitioner in cybersecurity space. So Sujit, you have been hearing this conversation from by hiding yourself. I would like to ask a very specific question in the interest of time. That given the broadened function of managing cybersecurity for an extended perimeterless enterprise, where the regulators' demands on CISOs are expanding every day, how do you see the accountability being fixed, especially if we go back to the incident, what happened with the Uber CISO? a little defamed though, but I will still say that, was jailed for covering up a breach that happened in 2016. I mean, besides managing threats, isn't there a need for looking at the governance and responsibility part as well?
Absolutely, Rahul. Very relevant question in these times, and I guess not reading too much into what happened at the Uber, it's very unfortunate. But from what I've actually read and observed, I think they were under investigation and they were under oath to disclose information. So there are two things. One, in terms of being ethical. Second, in terms of trying to evade arrest or trying to help somebody to evade arrest. Right. So those are two things which actually went against this specific gentleman. So for CISOs, I think going forward, and we also heard the panelists talk about accidental CISOs, and many a times that is becoming the norm, right? I mean, these roles are overlooked, and now today we have a new child in the block, the data privacy officers, and that also is going to take the same steps, accidental privacy officers. So where does it leave us? It will again leave us at a point where accountability, we would probably expect accountability from them without clearly defining their roles, right? So when I say roles, how do they actually be part of the governance structure? How do they have a conversation with the board, with the chairman, the board of directors? And of course, how would they interact with the operations team? So in my mind, and I think we also had a chat last Saturday, and where Anuprita was also advocating a CISO's role is more of a tactical role, right? So you need to take certain hard stands. You have to drive governance, but you also have to play a tactical role. Now, having said that, the point what I would like to draw to everybody's attention is, and being part of the IC squared community and being a credential holder, we are all governed and expected to abide by the code of ethics. And there are 4 tenets where we need to abide by, and one of them, it talks about act honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, and legally. This is one of them amongst the 4, right? So I guess it covers everything. So all of us need to, as CISOs, have to have a very strong integrity. We need to be honest about what we do. And I guess we need to have the courage to face and tell the board where we stand in terms of our exposures and risk mitigation strategies. Rahul?
Excellent perspective. And I think, whenever I start a discussion with a cybersecurity professional, I personally, sorry to be a little opinionated here, but I personally find most conversations moving or tilting towards technology adoption, and very less conversations, which I call very evolved conversations, are done in the realm of people and the processes. And therefore, governance, for example, is a completely, or rather, I would say, not so much, has not been so much in focus until now. And how big this whole area is, you can debate on cybersecurity, technology, risk governances the entire day, and you will find shortage of time at the end of it. Okay, so I think we are doing decent on time. I'm told that it is going to be about 4:30. Sujit, please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. We are about 4 minutes to.
All right. So I give the rein back to you. You can, you are at liberty now to sum it up or ask our esteemed panelists to give a 60-second, super short view about the future, and then please feel free to sum it up.
Yeah, I think we'll go with the 60 seconds futuristic view. Maybe
all right.
This time around, we will start with Puneet. And
reverse
then
the
you do the
process.
reverse order, and then I will do the vote of thanks. Puneet,
Thanks,
over to you.
Sujit. I think this was riveting. There's a lot of different perspectives. 60 minutes. I'd go out with that and add a few fancy names into it. I've already talked about layered security causing complacency. I think that's number one for me. I think we also then need to look at with SOCs or automation in place, like automated defenses could backfire if they are left to run on their own without human intervention. And Mel talked about the lack of skills in doing that. So layered security causing complacency, automated defenses, backfiring. I think we need to start to look at the concept of data lake or data well poisoning, because if we have a lot of these data lakes, then how do we secure them such that the data cannot be poisoned? I would also then start to look at identity and the compromised identity credentials being weaponized. And there's the concept of an assassin's mace, to say, okay, can a compromised identity end-to-end create that perfect attack vector into an organization through and through? And then last but not the least for me, or perhaps two more, one is around digital twins. So as we start to create digital twins do give rise to double the attack surface as well. So let's look at that. But last but not the least, my favorite, with the rise of cloud and digital, let's not forget that we do have legacy infrastructure. So let's just make sure that's not neglected, which then goes back to cyber hygiene. So that's how I would end it. Sujit, thank you. Rahul, thank you.
Thank you, Puneet. Sunari, would you like to go next? And
Sorry.
yeah,
So
your closing thoughts, Sunari.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So since we are all sitting in this panel amidst football fever, I read something interesting recently that the future malicious cyber attacks in this evolving landscape are going to be like Messi or Ronaldo, sophisticated, powerful, and seemingly unstoppable. And as CISOs and cyber leaders, we would have to take the lead to play the role of goalkeeper and try to keep away the bad actors from scoring goals. So my take on this is to basically go back to basics and keep it simple. So I would say adopt a risk-based approach, because you cannot prevent all the threats from happening. Practice basic cyber hygiene, because as we discussed, the attacks are getting sophisticated, but the threat vectors remain the same. So practice basic cyber hygiene. And finally, invest on your people. Secure your trusted skills and continue investing on awareness. Thank you, Sujit.
All right, thank you. Mel, would you want to go next? And then finally, we sum it up with Sunil.
Yes, Sujit. I think from my end, just a few points. Well, first is to leverage on artificial intelligence to actually strengthen your cyber defenses. And then expand what you can see in your SOC, somewhat to a fusion concept where you can see and assess on a 363 basis on the different risks. So that would already include enterprise risk, specifically on the fraud side. And then I think lastly is work with the different sectors of your society, right? Private sectors, the regulators, right? Of course, your vendors, suppliers, and also not to actually discount the academe. Be part of the unified security defense if you are into your passion to actually really combat the adversary.
Thank you, Mel. And Sunil, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I am now in the position which Puneet was for most of the talk. Like all the things are said already, so I think very less scope for me to say. But I would just highlight a couple of things which already said by other panelists. One is keeping the simple and smart, right? So from the detection perspective, as I said, collect minimum so that you have to create minimum detection rules, and then you will not have an alert fatigue, and you will not put your SOC analyst in a position where they're going to miss stuff. So that would be the first one for me. Second thing, Sunari and Puneet talk about hygiene. So I would say two particular areas to pay attention to. One is the phishing. So the companies should have a very good phishing management regime, right? Where people are reporting, which also goes to the security awareness, but also how you tackle that, once the phishing emails come in. So there are ways you can monitor your email security tools. You can detect from there. And the second is, of course, your employees reporting to phishing emails, because this will still be the prime way of impacting the organization. Vulnerability management, publicly exploitable vulnerabilities, and also, publicly visible connection methods, like, for example, RDP, SSH. We are still seeing people are still having this open to the internet, which is very easier for the attacker to come in and basically exploit. So it's very important to have. And also, I have not seen many companies have a process around 0 day. People bash too much about vulnerability management, risk-based vulnerability management, patching, but we see, like first 1 to 3 weeks when the patch is not available, you are still at risk. So how do you look at your entire cyber ecosystem, right? Your prevention controls, your detection controls, what you can do to basically reduce the risk until you have the patch, because even if you have the patch, sometimes you cannot patch because of business reasons and priorities. So my thought would be that all the companies should really look at 0 day, vulnerability management process. It's very, very important process. Yeah. Identity as a new parameter. I think most of the panelists talk about that as we are in cloud and working from home. So there are no defined parameters in the offices. So protecting identity, monitoring it from the user's behavior perspective, what users are doing, it's a very important thing to take care of. Mel mentioned about AI, machine learning, which is using analytics instead of, because now attackers are using analytics. So why not the defender use the analytics as well to detect things from our side as well. And the last thing is security validation, right? So we invest so much money in our prevention, detection, response controls. It's also very important to also validate whether those controls are working. So there are technologies available nowadays where you can actually validate if your prevention control is working, if your detection control is working. It's your SOC actually, once the alert comes, what are they doing about it? Because otherwise you will have a false sense of security if you're not testing your entire security regime. So validating your security controls would be the last thing I would share here as to invest by the organization, because you don't want the attackers to test your security controls. So it's better you test them and you find out the weaknesses either in your prevention, detection, or response, so that you can fix it before somebody else exploits it.
Thank you, Sunil. Rahul, I'm not going to let you go just like that. You asked all the questions. I'm sure there's something you want to take back and talk about it. So what would that be for you?
Great. Thank you. I will certainly contribute as a non-moderating participant here, Sujit. It's been great listening to different kinds of leaders. My take from this is that the environment is not going to be simple anymore. Partially we are responsible for creating those complexities. Partially, there are circumstances which have made the environment very complex, and therefore, the lesser you make your security technology footprint, the better it is from a manageability point of view. None of the threats that we spoke about are very unique to our times. As I said in the beginning, that their intensity, their speed of execution, the method to execute might have undergone certain changes, but fundamentally those threats remain the same. And if we are not learning the lessons the hard way, and as the words that Puneet said are still echoing in my ears, that compliance is no guarantee to a strong cybersecurity posture, and therefore you have to very frequently analyze your environment. You have to very frequently look at the aspects where your crown jewels reside. You have to look at the aspects where are you facing the most threats from, and therefore apply logic there, apply technology there, marry the process, people, and technology together, because technology is not going to solve problems for you. Last but not the least, my problem with the community is that they hold the information very close to their chest. While the governments and regulators are trying to push it very hard that you have to make disclosures within stipulated time frame, still across continents, and this is not unique to Asian countries or any other continent, this is across continents, that CISOs or cybersecurity professionals, just because they kind of fear that their brand image or their trust will get shattered, they do not share. And I think each incident stays unique if we are not sharing that, because that same incident or the same attack method can be used on different other industries. Nobody knows how to deal with that, and therefore it is very important for the industry to start sharing. Those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul, for your closing thoughts. And I take this opportunity to thank all of you, right? All of you, especially the participants who have made time to attend this session. I also want to thank the strategic partners. I'm not going to name them one by one, but we recognize all of them. But I want to name all our panelists one by one. Anuprita, Sunari, Mel, Sunil, and Puneet. Thank you very much for being here, for sharing your thoughts. And I've not forgotten Rahul, my good friend, and he made this look very simple, and he brought in different perspectives, and he had that knack to get the best out of you, right? So that's what Rahul is known for, and I want to thank Rahul sincerely from my perspective and our board, IC² Colombo chapter. Thank you all of you for being here, for sharing your views. And I look forward to collaborating with you in another session in the next year. Probably we would meet somewhere mid-year and probably ask ourselves, what did we get right? Right? Maybe it's a good thing to reflect as well. Right? I also want to thank my board and also Suresh for being here. And with that note, thank you so much and have a great evening. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Sujit.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.